It began with a radar contact that should not have existed. Early in the morning, a submarine appeared on the surface of the water, drifting slowly through a cold, gray sea. It belonged to a military fleet, and according to official schedules, it was not expected to return for several more days. At first, command assumed it had surfaced because of a technical problem, but as nearby vessels approached, they noticed something deeply unsettling. No one was standing on deck. No signal flags were raised. No emergency communication had been sent. The submarine moved with the ocean current, silent and strangely calm, as if it had simply risen from below without purpose. From a distance, it looked intact, stable, and operational. Yet the complete absence of human activity made the scene feel wrong in a way no one could immediately explain. Inside the Naval Command Room, confusion spread quickly. The submarine's return did not match its assigned mission window, and its silence made the situation more serious by the minute. Communication officers attempted to establish contact using standard military channels, emergency codes, and direct-range transmission. Nothing came back. There was no response from the captain, no confirmation from the bridge, and no sign that anyone aboard was even receiving the messages. Still, the vessel remained upright and stable, which suggested that critical systems had not completely failed. That contradiction only made the situation stranger. A dead submarine would have listed, flooded, or disappeared, but this one had returned to the surface almost gracefully. It was present, visible, and somehow functional. What it lacked was the one thing no machine of that kind should ever be without: the people trained to control it. A boarding team was assembled and sent toward the drifting submarine by small launch. The sea was relatively calm, but the closer they got, the more unnatural the vessel appeared. There were no signs of battle damage on the hull, no smoke from internal fire, and no visible breach near the waterline. Even the access hatch looked normal from the outside. One officer later described the approach as the most unsettling silence he had ever experienced. A submarine at sea is never truly quiet. There should have been mechanical sounds, movement, footsteps, something. But this one sat on the water like a sealed object abandoned by time. As the team attached themselves to the outer ladder and climbed onto the deck, they expected at any moment to hear shouts from inside or emergency knocks from below. Instead, they heard only the wind passing over steel and the dull movement of water against the hull. The hatch was unlocked. That detail alone sent a wave of unease through the boarding team. Standard protocol required the top hatch to remain secured during operations unless active personnel were using it. Yet when the officers tested the locking wheel, it turned without resistance. The hatch opened with a heavy metallic groan, releasing a rush of stale air from below. It was not the smell of fire or fuel leak they expected. Instead, the interior smelled still, recycled, and strangely cold, as if the submarine had been sealed in silence for longer than its timeline allowed. One by one, the officers descended into the vessel with flashlights and sidearms ready. They expected to find unconscious crew, signs of emergency evacuation, or evidence of sabotage. What they found instead was something far more disturbing. The submarine was not damaged. It was simply empty of people. The first corridor looked almost normal, which made it worse. Emergency lights glowed faintly along the walls, illuminating narrow passageways filled with pipes, panels, and sealed compartment doors. The air systems still hummed softly in the background, proving that at least some power remained active. Yet there were no voices, no footsteps, and no signs of recent movement. Personal lockers were shut, equipment was in place. A coffee mug sat on a shelf in the communications section, half full and undisturbed. That single detail struck one of the officers more than anything else. It suggested interruption, not abandonment. Someone had been there, someone had left in the middle of an ordinary task, but no escape order had been issued, no emergency buoy released, and no rescue craft launched. The submarine appeared frozen at the exact moment when routine should have continued, except that every member of the crew was gone. When the team entered the control room, the silence became even harder to process. Instrument panels still glowed across the consoles, casting cold reflections over metal surfaces and empty chairs. Navigation systems remained powered, depth controls were set to surface position, internal clocks were running. It looked as though the submarine had completed a controlled ascent before drifting into inactivity. Yet every station was abandoned. Headsets hung in place, logs were open on the chart table. A pen rested beside an unfinished entry, as if the officer writing it expected to return in seconds. The captain's chair stood slightly turned toward the central display, suggesting someone had risen from it suddenly. There was no blood, no struggle, and no evidence of violence anywhere in the room. The control center was operational, organized, and hauntingly intact. It felt less like a disaster site and more like a stage after the actors had disappeared. The official logbook became the first real clue, though it solved nothing. The final written entry was incomplete, ending in the middle of a sentence as though the writer had been interrupted unexpectedly. Earlier entries described routine depth changes, equipment checks, and standard patrol movement. There was no indication of panic, no mention of damage, and no warning of hostile contact. Investigators examined the handwriting closely, hoping to detect stress or urgency, but the final lines looked steady. The last complete sentence referenced a minor systems check in the forward section, something so ordinary that it only deepened the mystery. If a disaster had occurred, why had there been no mention of it? Why had the last written moments of the voyage remained so calm? The logbook suggested that whatever happened to the crew occurred suddenly, without time for command to document, explain, or even react in a way the record could capture. In the mess hall, the boarding officers found another scene that felt impossible to explain. A meal appeared to have been in progress shortly before the submarine returned to the surface. 2 trays were still set out. 1 cup had been knocked slightly sideways, but not enough to suggest panic or impact. A serving container remained open, and utensils were laid where they had last been used. It was not the arrangement of a crew that had prepared to abandon ship. It was the arrangement of ordinary life interrupted without warning. Food aboard a submarine follows routine with almost mechanical precision. Crews do not leave meals untouched unless something has pulled them away fast and with authority. Yet there was no general alarm recorded in the vessel's emergency system, no evacuation order, no fire suppression trigger, just the silent evidence of a normal moment that somehow became the last normal moment for everyone on board. The torpedo compartment was checked next, partly to rule out the worst possibilities. If there had been internal damage, pressure failure, or weapons malfunction, some trace would almost certainly remain in that section. Instead, the room was orderly. All weapon mounts were secured, safety locks remained engaged, there were no scorch marks, ruptures, or signs of accidental discharge. The officers moved carefully through the compartment, scanning every surface for clues. They found none. Even more strangely, inventory counts matched perfectly. Nothing had been removed, deployed, or tampered with. The room's stillness created an uncurving sense of control, as if every system aboard had continued to obey procedure, even after the people responsible for them no longer existed within the vessel. The submarine was revealing the same message in every compartment. Whatever happened to the crew had not happened through chaos, but through something far harder to define. The sleeping quarters made the situation feel personal in a way the control room had not. Bunks were neatly made or partially occupied by folded blankets. Personal books, watches, photographs, and letters remained stored in their assigned spaces. A half-finished card game sat on a lower table between 2 bunks, as if the players expected to return after duty rotation. Each object reinforced the same impossible truth. The crew had not packed, prepared, or planned to leave. Their lives were still present in the room, arranged in the intimate details of routine, while the people themselves were entirely absent. Nothing had been taken, nothing had been destroyed, only people were missing. Attention then turned to the environmental systems, because those offered one of the few ways an entire crew could be affected at once. Air filtration, oxygen circulation, carbon dioxide scrubbers, and pressure controls were all tested with urgency, but the initial readings showed no catastrophic failure. There were minor fluctuations in the archived data, though nothing severe enough to incapacitate trained personnel instantly. No toxic contamination was detected at levels consistent with total crew loss. No smoke residue was found in the vents. The systems were not perfect, but they were functional. That result troubled investigators more than a clear malfunction would have. If the submarine had poisoned its crew, the data should have shown it. If pressure had failed, the vessel should have reflected physical trauma. Instead, the boat remained structurally sound, internally stable, and absent only of human life. It was as if every technical explanation came close enough to sound plausible, then stopped just short of becoming true. At the sonar station, one detail stood out from everything else. The headset had been left slightly off its stand, as though removed in haste or dropped during a sudden distraction. The screen still displayed the last processed field, a dense pattern of ocean noise and contact traces that...
It began on a night that should have been completely ordinary. A luxury hotel stood almost silent beneath the rain, its glass entrance reflecting the wet lights of the empty street outside. Inside, the lobby was quiet, polished, and still. A receptionist reviewed paperwork behind the front desk while security cameras recorded every corner of the building as they always did. There were only a few guests checked in that night, and no unusual activity had been reported. Yet sometime after midnight, one of the cameras captured something that would later unsettle everyone who saw it. A man entered the lobby, crossed the marble floor, and walked toward the elevators with calm, confident steps. But there was one problem. According to the hotel records, no one had arrived at that hour. No room had been assigned to him, and no one at the desk remembered seeing him. The footage was first reviewed the next morning during a routine check of the overnight recordings. At first, nothing seemed strange. The man looked like any other guest. He wore a dark coat, carried no luggage, and moved with the kind of ease that suggested he knew exactly where he was going. He never looked toward the front desk, and no one appeared to greet him. In the recording, he entered through the front doors without hesitation and headed straight across the lobby. There was something calm about the way he moved, almost too calm, as if he had no reason to rush because he already knew what came next. But the strange part was not his appearance, it was the fact that the receptionist on duty insisted no one had entered at that time. She swore the lobby had been empty, even though the camera clearly showed otherwise. The receptionist was called into the security office to review the footage herself. She watched it in silence, leaning closer to the monitor with visible confusion. The timestamp was correct, the angle was correct, the lobby in the video was unmistakably the same one where she had been sitting all night, yet she had no memory of the man crossing the floor in front of her desk. Even more unsettling was the fact that in the footage, she never looked up. While the man walked through the center of the lobby, only a few meters away, she remained focused on the paperwork in front of her. To the security staff, it seemed possible that she had simply missed him, but she insisted that was impossible. The lobby doors made a sound when they opened. Footsteps echoed on the floor. She should have seen him. She should have heard him. And yet, in her memory, the lobby had remained completely empty. The interior elevator camera recorded the man from above. He stood motionless in the center of the cabin, his face partly hidden beneath the shadow of his coat collar. Most guests shift their weight, check their phones, or glance at the floor numbers while riding. He did none of these things. He simply stood there, still and upright, looking toward the closed doors as if listening to something beyond them. The footage had no audio, but everyone who watched it later described the same feeling. The silence in that small space seemed unnatural. Stranger still, the elevator did not immediately move. According to the timestamp,